let's jump into our main topic that we were talking about. You got to jump into Nightfall. You've been playing, not Nightfall, Destiny 2 Lightfall. We were trying to run some Nightfalls the other week. Playing the campaign on Legendary, which has, which I kind of encourage you to do. Hopefully you don't hate me for it. And I've been able to play, but not as much. So I was able to play some a little bit last week. So I was able to play a lot this weekend and had a couple people hop in with me and had an absolute blast. I'm also playing it on Legendary. What's your first takeaway? Because you skipped over Witch Queen, and this is essentially your reintroduction to Destiny after at least a 2-year break. Where do you sit?
One of those things is that when you play multiple MMOs. So I currently on my machine have played, updated, and then play at least once every 2 weeks. But many of them at least once a week, many of them a couple days a week. I play 5 MMOs. Mm-hmm. I'd love to add more. People are like, oh, when are you going to add ESO? When are you going to add RuneScape? When are you going to for now, let's just cap it at 5. And so of those 5 MMOs, when you play multiple MMOs, one of the common questions is, what would you take out of the game you're playing right now and carry it with you into other games? Mm-hmm. What Lightfall gave me that I would absolutely take with me into Final Fantasy XIV, into World of Warcraft, into Guild Wars 2, into New World, into any game I ever play, is multiple difficulty settings for the story. If I could go back and day and date, December 10th of 2021, I guess it was, boot up Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker for the first time, and I could play it on extreme, and there were extreme single player scenarios, and when I got to the trial, I had to clear it on extreme, and when I got into the dungeons, I had to clear them on an extreme difficulty, and it took that story that I think took me like 65 or 70 hours to clear, taking my time, reading all the quests and so on, and I extended that out to being a 200-hour clear, a 300-hour clear. I would hands down do that. Hands down, no questions asked. I would do it in World of Warcraft. Like we get a brand new expansion every 2 years, and the patches are a fraction of the size. They are a 10th, a 20th of the size of an expansion. That's true in every game. It's true in WoW. It's true in 14. The expansions they can be big. A living season in Guild Wars is a massive thing. It is nothing compared to an expansion. And so the idea of rushing through that is, honestly, I want to play a lot at the beginning, and it's just not that hard. And so if you play 40 hours in the first week, like I did with Lightfall, mm-hmm. or 100 hours in the first week, like I did with Endwalker, you're just done. I played just over 100 hours of Final Fantasy XIV within the first 7 days of launch. You're just done. Like it finishes. It just completes. You get a lot done. Mm-hmm. And like having a harder difficulty is amazing. The legendary difficulty, I don't know that is like the exact amount tuned. I don't know. Does it maybe do a little harder, a little easier? Do we need more than one difficulty? Whatever. But just the concept that I was doing it on a difficulty and that there was a normal available. And there were people who don't play Destiny all that often. Maybe they don't play a lot of shooters that often. I play a lot of shooters. I have dozens and dozens of hours in the newest Call of Duty, and it's only been launched since October. So like I play a lot of shooters. There are people that said normal is very hard for them. So I'm not saying gate those people out.
Right. You're not saying forced extreme difficulty.
These games have millions of players. What are the sheer odds that there's one difficulty to satisfy all of us?
At its core, it's interesting because Final Fantasy XIV actually does have multiple difficulties for its story, but they scaled down.
Only when she failed.
Yeah. So you try it, and then it's like, oh, hey, we're gonna, if you want, you can use that. And that's a fine option too. Like games do that sometimes automatically. Like one of the things that's fascinating is that like within game design, like they've shown even back in the GameCube eras, like it's like, hey, yeah, this player is really struggling with this spot. Let's make it easier and lower the enemy count or do things that you're not necessarily like immediately available, that the game is dynamically adjusting and scaling the difficulty to you, the player, because ultimately, they don't want to sit here and build a fight that it's like, well, I never was able to finish that story because at level 20, that fight it was impossible. And it's like, okay, yeah, you don't want to have that level of experience, but I think I agree. I love that they added that in with the Witch Queen. I think for me, and I don't know what it is, and not talking spoilers here, but I think I like Witch Queen far better the experience overall, I felt like it was way more streamlined than it is right now. And from a story narrative perspective, I guess it's like, it's the story, what it is. Like, I'm just almost to the point where like I'm not really interested in it. I'm not enjoying it. And I've seen some people tweet things out online. I'm like, they're like, oh, the story is like, I was feeling that beforehand. I'm kind of glad that it's not like all of a sudden, going to be something else. Oh, it's
story's not why I play MMOs. So like, it's not a required element. And so the voice acting quality is incredible. There's some really neat storytelling aspects in like how it talks to you as you move. What I will say is like, we need some audio settings that say like, if you're playing on Legendary, especially, and you're going to have to try against a boss, I think the boss before the one I'm on right now, I think I got my clear on like the 39th try. And so the fact that there's some voiceover in the boss encounters is super cool until you've heard that same audio overlay 39 times. Less cool. I think it's 39 deaths. And so I was doing it with Chris the Mod. And so that's 2 deaths per attempt. But you're still talking about 15, 16 attempts back to back, which is a couple hours of the same music and the same audio. Their music design needs to massively step up. The music is just filler music, and it's fine as filler music, but it's just training montage elevator music is all it is. And like Final Fantasy 14 has just really shown me that music can be so much more than that. WoW is guilty of this. Guild Wars is guilty of this. New World's guilty of this. It's fine. The people who work on the music are talented people who deserve to have a job, and I'm glad they exist. What Soken and his team do just outclass those other games. I don't know what causes it. I don't know if there's somebody that needs to be blamed or everybody just needs to get better. I don't know what it is. I'm just telling you that Soken and his team are running laps around what every other MMO calls music. Just absolute laps around it. And so in Lightfall, I almost have to mute the music after a certain number of attempts. It's just, It's just hard. Yeah. If you're playing it on Legendary,
I've been playing on Legendary, but I don't know.
2 hours of the same dun 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 dun. Just put that on loop, and it's like, oh, stop.
Maybe I'm just better than you at the game. I haven't been in those fights. I haven't done the.
So I do think the second to last and the last boss encounter would be easier solo. The second to last encounter, I ended up cheesing and did it with Chris. There's a spot in the level that you don't get shot at. But when I played through it by myself, without Chris took a little food break, and I got the boss down to half my first attempt. I got it down to 33% my second attempt. So like, I think the boss is absolutely soloable. The moment you put somebody else in there, the advantage of having somebody else is that, so everything scales up and you get like more ads, more life or whatever. But in trade, they can be rezzed. But the last 2 encounters, the act of rezzing your ally will get you or them killed. And then you can only be raised once. And
you have to raise over. But you have to raise within 30 seconds, otherwise everything kind of starts over.
Hard. I think for story, it should be set at either more raises, or the raises should recover, or the 30 seconds should be you have 30 seconds of res time. So if you were standing right next to them and you res them within 3 seconds, now the next time they go down, they have 27. I think there should, something has to be changed. The 2 and done is just too punishing for the second to last and last compared to compared to how hard Legendary is across everything else. Or there should be multiple levels. So maybe that's Legendary plus, and then there's just a rate, because I don't want to go back, because people are like, we'll just go back down to normal. And then Chris went and helped Chili over a Moogle Go round, cleared the final boss, and he said, we dropped down to normal. And you and I were progging that boss right before that. And he said, the difference between Legendary and normal is, I believe his word was staggering. He said, normal, it just fell over. And so it's like, well, then I don't want to go down to normal. I want to do it on Legendary, but Legendary with multiple people is hard.
Yeah, the thing is, I would definitely confirm the rezzing kind of problem that it brings in, because it ends up being the same problem they had in Witch Queen in terms of scalability, where it's like it's easier solo than it is with multiple people for that very problem. And you proposed, I think, a couple of really interesting solutions, whether it was total res time or, something else, because at the end of the day, or some way that it kind of slightly recovers after, like, you haven't been killed in 10 minutes and you're still in this fight. Okay, we're going to just give you like a clear that charge, so that way you can keep progressing.
Yeah, if you die in the opening volley of ads or something because you either make a mistake or something about it just spawned unfortunately, and you jump somewhere and you die, or on that final fight, there's some movement through the level that can accidentally get you killed. And so you're moving through the level and you make a mistake like 30 seconds in, you might as well wipe it up because now you have to go. I mean, what can easily be 10 minutes of the fight. Not to mention like their scaling is a really weird system, and that starts to get onto a gearing conversation because they sync your item level. They have it there. There's a minimum recommended and there's a cap, and the cap sinks you down. But power level is just a fraction of it. Your substats, which is basically kind of like your materia, can be drastically improved without affecting your light level. Your exotic perks that change the way your build functions can be drastically improved by having a larger library of exotics. So like there's all these things within the loot system that are not item level. So there's all this horizontal progression that yields a vertical level of power. And it's a non-zero difference of power. And it's not, this does this type of damage and this type of damage. So as long as I have multiple unlocked, which is what like Mr. Happy described in Frosty's recent podcast with him and Zeno about like, well, there's these, I needed 15 gear sets to feel successful in 11 because they were all these different types. No, this is way bigger than that. The substats, you can have just better. So this starts to mimic like Diablo, where like once you get to that top thing, you're now also looking for perfect statted of the same rarity. So like your item level didn't rise per se, but there is a RNG to the stats. So the fact that I could just have higher, so I'm capped on Resil now, and I'm working on capping.
Oh, cool.
I'm working on capping mobility, and those are just two different substats, and you can cap them at 100. I don't need my light level to go up to raise my mobility, which is interesting. And mobility affects a lot about the way my class plays.
Right.
So if I could get my mobility a little higher, I think it's at like 60 or so. If I could get my mobility up at like 80 or 90, I would be a lot more powerful, even if my item level didn't rise.
Right.
So
yeah, that's where I would say that from a real positive perspective, like, and this is weird because everything I'm really enjoying about the game has nothing to do with the expansion. It's all the quality of life changes that have come in. The mod system in which that it gets managed. You have the artifact system, which is now just perks that are applied. It just seems so clean. And then you marry that with the loadout system so that now I'm able to feel like I can kind of jump in and do different things so much easier and cleaner that I'm excited to step into the game easy because it just these constant complaints. Right. Like I actually have not for the first time stepped into PvP at all because I've been just enjoying my experience and just loving the quality of life that has been baked into it. I'm actually more interested in the Season of Defiance story than I am in overall the story that's going on with Lightfall, and then that being coupled into what I've seen people talk, not like about spoilers, but about how that the rest of this year story is building off of the Lightfall story in a sense. And I'm like, that's going to be interesting because we have had these self-contained stories throughout the year. So maybe that's something that keeps me more engaged in overall. But
that's why I didn't focus on the negative reviews. Like the negative reviews were literally coming out within like 3 hours of the game hitting launch, which means some people probably hadn't even been able to like download and install and like be in the game, and they were already ready to hate on it. And so like people were hating on it so fast. And what's interesting about this expansion is it came with an announcement of, we want to lean a lot harder into supporting the game seasonally. We want to lean into having, these regular expansions and these regular content updates that are substantial. And so like they rolled out a long-term content plan. So they basically said, hey, in the past, when you've come over, we've had hamburgers and we've hung out for a while. But this time I'd like to have a 5-course meal. I've prepared some drinks that are meant to pair with each course. We've got some appetizers. I've really thought about this. They put the appetizers out. You pick up the first chip. The sauce drips on the floor off the chip. And you go, that's it. The whole meal's ruined. And then they just went to the internet to be raged about this story. And like, I understand if you're mad about the story, it's your purview. I'm not the guy to really do a great job of commenting on quality of story, especially in a game that I skipped an expansion. But all I can think is, can we just hear the guy out? Like the guy said he has a 5-course meal. So like, if you don't want to eat the appetizer, don't. But like, there's more coming. So for people to already be ready to be mad, one of the things that's interesting about Destiny is as a community, every MMO has this, but Destiny in particular has a lot of people whose comment starts with, I'm really frustrated. So I'm 55 billion hours into the game, and what makes me mad is, and it just starts that way.
That's so true.
And it's like, and then that same commenter 6 months later goes, so I just reinstalled the game, and I'm now 62 billion hours in, and what makes me mad is, and like, so there's all this anger and negative reviews, overwhelmingly negative, but you're still playing it.
Yeah.
So like, is it that bad? Like, you didn't like the appetizer, so you got up and got mad. Can I sit somebody else down at your seat? Because I've still got a steak coming and I'd love for somebody to eat it. Well, no, I might want the steak. You just yelled at me. Like, it doesn't sound like you want the steak. Like, so it just, everybody's getting so angry. But then they're still playing. So Destiny just seems to be filled with a community that gets really, really upset, but plays the game a lot.
It's going to be interesting because it's one of the things that, just like how the WoW killer label, and there's been, Destiny killer labels, where it's like a lot of people who are frustrated. Like, I wish there was a bigger competitor to Destiny, because then I think the player base could, like, all of a sudden, like you say, what ideas would you take from this game and transpose it into another, the game.
76 was going to try to do that. Like, let's go way back to like when they first announced it, not to anything that happened
today.
after that.
Or someone's already in the comments being like, "You thought Fallout 76?" blah, blah, blah.
and then there was also, I also thought that Borderlands was moving in that direction back before the most recent franchise there. Some of the rumor mill around it sounded like they were going to lean into a more MMO based space, and I thought Borderlands was set up really well to kind of lean into a Destiny type space. And I think the cell shading and stuff does a really good job of leaving min spec really interesting, and their RNG system around their loot system could lean in really well to make it a Diablo-esque looter shooter, which is what Destiny is. And so, and New World has a lot pulled from Destiny. A lot pulled from Destiny. Just like there's a lot of Guild Wars in WoW, and there's a lot of WoW in Final Fantasy. Somehow the Guild Wars kind of gets lost along that translation, that little game of telephone. But there is a lot of Destiny inside of, or a lot of Destiny inside of New World, and there's a lot of Diablo inside of Destiny. So
let's go back even further. Let's just take a little trip here. Destiny is Phantasy Star. Like, Phantasy Star Online is Destiny. And if you Google this, you should at some point today look at Destiny is Phantasy Star. There is a chart, a graphic image that literally will blow your mind away. You'll be like, oh, that's not me being hyperbolic. That is me literally saying, like, where is the inspiration? And that's where Phantasy Star Online, the original, like, it to a T, Destiny.
Thankfully, these pipes go both ways once you connect one. So like, there are times that people are like, and Mythic Plus was stolen from Fractals. And Mythic Plus, before they were called Mythic Plus, when there used to only be one difficulty, were called challenge modes before they moved to the point of having scalable, like Diablo Rifts. And challenge modes predate Guild Wars 2. So like they predate Fractals. And so when people are like, Fractals were stolen from Mythic Plus, it's like, yes, they were stolen from the future. Like, it's like, so like it goes both ways. But you definitely see a lot of like where one game does a lot of something and you see another game really pick up and carry that in their own way. And I definitely feel like I'm playing a Call of Duty RPG with a loot system that just borrows straight up from Diablo. It feels a lot like that, especially as I started to get into, just like every MMO, it's an inventory management game. And I start to realize what ended up happening is I soft capped on day one. So on day one, I hit the 1750 point. And so what that means is your item level rises through a system called power. Everybody resets. All your existing items get scaled, which is interesting. And then the game feeds you a bunch to kind of power you up. And from 1750 on, it gets much harder. But at the same time, I'm working on substats. And so as soon as I hit 1750, like, my power level goes up very, very rarely now. And as it's continuing to slowly creep up, I'm up at like 17. I don't know. I'm getting there. I'm moving up. But
moving on up.
The hard cap's at 1810 for the season.
1810,
and so that's your journey to cross over the season. 1750 is like hitting the maximum item level that would be at the end of a campaign within World of Warcraft or at the end of MSQ in Final Fantasy. It's the equivalent of hitting level cap, since there's not really a level cap. And so 1750 is very easy to get to. And as I grind up, what I'm realizing is now I'm still looking at gear that is a lower item level than mine if it's better substatted. because
Better
there is a
substats,
method
baby.
to up the item level of loot. So if you can imagine WoW players, if you found a lower level item level piece of loot from maybe an old raid, or it just dropped from a green and you could upgrade it, which they do have a system like that in WoW, but it doesn't quite work this gracefully. If you could just fix the item level, and there is a system in WoW that you can upgrade the item level. And you can basically just push this up. So if I get a better stat roll, which can literally just have more stats, it's not just better ratios, it's more. So I basically, very Temtem-esque, I basically am looking for how do I increase my ratios and how do I increase my total stats?
Yeah.
And I just want to keep working those closer and closer and closer to where I have perfect substats. And then at the same time, I'm managing the perpetual grind of driving up my item level, which is called Light. And so that's all happening. And that feels very Diablo-esque, where like the best thing I can do is basically find the equivalent of a meth run. And I can just slam it until I find so many purple items on the ground that one of them is bound to have better stats.
Yeah, 100%. That's part of the fun in terms of what I say, like where I enjoy their horizontal progression, because their vertical progression in power is something that I don't put a lot of stress into, which is nice. It's like, okay, it goes up, cool. But then it's like, what am I actively seeking? And so then like within the guns, within the catalysts, within various like mods, and now with the loadout system, it makes the build crafting, I think, so much more enjoyable of an experience, where before it was like, well, I got something I'm fine with, let's go. It's like, all right, no one's complaining, doing good numbers, we're good. Like, as opposed to like, now it gives me the ability to start like actually like, okay, cool, I'm going to test this out. What's more fun to play with? I've been really enjoying the seasonal bow, that I like, even like Sir Rule in our community already got the like the catalyst, but I'm enjoying that. I like the whole ice thing. I'm going with an ice theme right now for some reason, where before I hated
too few shots per minute, man.
Yeah.
A bow just cannot put the amount of ammo down range I'm interested in.
And then I pair that with my fusion rifle, and I've been going ham. So I'm gonna keep playing. Obviously, gonna finish the story and keep playing Destiny. What I'm curious to see is Destiny in this year with the changes. Does it manage to hold me season over season, or is this something where it's just like it ends up being my typical Destiny playthrough, where pretty much the final season of the year leading into the expansion, I'm heavily into it. The first season outside of the expansion, does the second and third season, that that mid-season cycle of this expansion, hold my interest? And we'll find out. Like, there's no way to know. Every year I feel really positive about it. This year, feel real positive about the core changes. The narrative in and of itself is like, I'm already just like, I don't care about anything going on. Like, it's everything else is going on, but now I don't know, maybe I'm just a little bit bitter to this whole like community that's been like hidden away from us. Like, all right, sucks to be y'all, I don't know, maybe that's where it's rooted. We'll have to wait and see. Chris, you got any final thoughts before we send you back on your way over? And you also got some stuff coming up this week on Twitch. What do you got?
Patch 6.35 is this week in Final Fantasy. So like, one of the things I'm interested in this year, to kind of keep it pretty general, is that MMOs as a whole seem to be on a universal message of more content, more predictably, better communicated. And that seems to be the common core values. Final Fantasy's been historically pretty good at that. And they're even aiming to improve at it across the course of Endwalker, where the half patch being announced for this Tuesday means that it is exactly 56 days after the patch, which is interesting because 0.25 was 56 days after the patch. And 0.15 was 56 days after the patch. And so when they said they wanted to move to 4-month cycles with half patches 2 months after, they have been spot on at 8 weeks, 8 weeks, 8 weeks, 8 weeks. So predictable to a fault. And I think that's really interesting, as we look at these games aiming to be more consistent and better versions of themselves. And that's what I think Destiny's going to do. And so when people are mad on day one, it's like, okay, but you didn't let them get to the consistency part, because that part comes with time. So I assume nobody will go back and delete their old hateful comments posted to the internet when 3 months from now they're suddenly really happy and they're like, wow, I kind of knew the whole time it was going to be amazing. I could tell writing was on the wall. Like, no, you didn't. You were ripping them at launch. So if you're having fun, enjoy the game. If you're not having fun, play something else. If you have constructive feedback on the way out, leave it. And that's really the end of it. But I guess that's not exciting.
Well, guys, as we wrap up, I just want to say thanks to WG Productions, Paul, Games Freak, Chef, The Delivery Moogle, Genkai, Electra, Bring Back Fluffy Dogs, Riku, Phil the Meme, and Aaron over here on YouTube for the membership. And thanks to Farmer Girl for her insane support over on Twitch with Twitch subscribers as well. We've updated the Discord a little bit, so all subscribers now, anybody who's like in that category has like a nice gold nameplate with a little icon by their name. So if you guys have if you guys are supporting whether on Twitch, on YouTube, be sure to check your integrations. That way, if you want to have that special role and information attached to you, that's working. Now, on that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's show. Thanks everybody for tuning in so much with all the great conversation and so much more. We'll be back tomorrow with another show. So if you guys have suggestions for topics and things like that, keep them rolling. That's how we build these structures. I want to talk to Chris about PAX Day, a new MMO that got announced. Be kind of curious as his thoughts and perspective on it, because it's doing some things old school, doing some things new school, and it'll be interesting to see. So if you guys want to have a hangout for that, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the notifications when they go out, when we get these shows scheduled. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna hit end broadcast. I'm gonna let it spit itself out, and we will see you guys tomorrow.